I'll start with one of my later, I would say this is one of the oldest poems in the book. The book came out in 2012, and it is called Snow Tires at the Auto Garage. How different I am. For the third time, how changed. I know what he likes is the long earrings, the raccoon collar around the coat, these appliances, the way I don't stir around as much. He likes that I stand there and talk like a mute person. Being pleasant is how ladies act. Twisters are not pleasant. I ask questions he loves to answer. How's the wife? How's the new baby? A nice man, but he does not attend. He is a working man. I can tell I am hardly there. I have confided much to him in the past. Not once has he revealed my secrets. What I wish I could do, if doing makes matter, is take him over to where he can hear and disrobe. Now this is just an act. I'm still the same girl with the same things. It's only that I've learned now when to release myself and when to contain myself, that's all. It's none of my business, really. The act is a table I tolerate. I hate it even. Go ahead and clap for every single poem I read. All right, let me see what my setup here is. Number 2, I'm going to be, this was another one that I changed up. It wasn't going to be my first selection, but it was like, hey, read a slower, softer poem. But the next one will be a first timer out in public. Yep. You're going to turn the video off for this, aren't you, Jessie? Here's a poem called The Still. And it's a shorter piece, which kind of is a predecessor to the next poem you'll be hearing. Many times in my poetry, particularly in this book, you'll find that I have juxtapositions of moments. There'll be two sorts of things going on, two sorts of almost, I would say, events occurring simultaneously, and it's your job as the reader and your pleasure, I would hope, as the reader to differentiate between why I would choose to coalesce the two. And the trick is, in a Hitchcockian way, I try to put little presents in there for you. Should you determine that you've discovered what I've been hiding or semi-hiding. The Still. Big city girl in Virginia woodland. To prove a point, anyone could be friends with nature. I was there to try to see what he saw. Between the trees, the stillness, the steep drop to the ravine. Rain had passed and washed color from the timber, the sky sullied, dark and thick with gray. I was not to worry my hair would frizzle up past recognition. I'd been brought to his favorite backdrop and was being courted. But because in any kind of place, I search for the aberrant thing. The corner of my eye caught the red tail of the arrow poking up through the deep, pliant floor of leaves, and I was not surprised I'd found it. In it and in me it created a noise of danger, but the woods were immune. The woods, I was told, would embrace it like a brooch. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. All right. Here we go. This next piece is called Skateland, and it's my first public reading of this piece. I have two appalling stories to tell about it. Do you want to hear it before or after? After? Okay. Before? One before, one after? All right. I'll tell you here's the before. The before is last week, a dear friend of mine who's not very much younger than I, maybe 6, 7 years. 6, 7 years. I was saying to her, I'm going to have to say the phrase, Paul Revere's penis. And I'm going to have to say it. I'm going to have to say it. I got to get ready to say it. And she said, Paul, her face screwed up like she'd been hit with some kind of acid. And I said, Paul Revere's penis. Paul Revere and the Raiders. You've heard of this, right? And she hadn't. And what do you say to somebody who's never even heard? I mean, I was a very young child too. But I mean, who didn't watch those shows where they were playing, these grown guys were playing all their rock music, and it was fabulous. And apparently she wasn't, so she'd never heard of Paul Revere and the Raiders and the Young Rascals. And I was dumbfounded that she thought it was one if by land and two if by sea, which was not my point. So I had to regroup in my mind. So that's one appalling story number one. Appalling story number two will even be more interesting to you on a technical level. Skateland. Be with me on this one, please. I had to be pretty old when I finally got that my mother hadn't taught me proper hygiene. 6th grade. Training bras. Yes, you wash them, but who knew how often? Marcy Goldman washed hers every other day. Weeks I went. She had all the Nancy Drew mystery books. I had the same volumes on my desk, but she read hers. That afternoon, the walkway smelled of cement. Everything so saturated it all but gurgled. Maple trees slung sodden arms down to their sides in tree fatigue. We three sat on backyard cushions on the front step of Marcy's house. Swatches of something lay scattered on the pavement where the private walk turned common. Wet from rain, grainy, greenish-hued, torn-out magazine pages. They stuck as if glued to the path. Overgrown, untended bushes, high grass, kids, boys, 7 or 8-year-olds in some kind of back country yard or edge of the wood. They stood completely naked in almost pre-Raphaelite poses. Their little flaccid penises, scrotums like wilted roses, doughy forms. One boy holding the tip of the branch from a bush as if for balance or for modesty. And he was certainly a boy, but I, 11 years old, shunned interest in a boy child's nudity. I fancied Paul Revere and the Raiders, grown rock and rollers, hullabaloo summary. Just dangerous enough to put me down wildly. But stop when I said stop. If they listened, if I cried. Grown men who'd mastered the excrescence of the erection, a function which eluded my 6th grade mind, made me feel unpicked. Paul Revere's penis would have discovered a painful resistance to its knocking. My hymen a tight drumskin then. If only Paul had moved up, there he'd have found an itching supplicant. Way back at 7, I discovered it. Or rather, my Ken doll discovered it. Not sure how he got there, but there he did. Found it with his feet. I do not know how long I stood motionless in the driveway near the curb, but I could not tear myself away from the look of strain on these boys' faces, as if what they knew was this was stupid or foolishness. And what was the point of this ugly thing with no point to it? And a feeling came upon me of being watched while I peered at these things, someone from behind some window curtain, stroking some part of themselves, hoping for a reaction, maybe. I'm talking about a form of destination. Shame tapped me, followed by a weird, aroused repulsion. And I tried to discard them, the torn off pages. I shook and shook my hands to release me from them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Here's a piece I hold no responsibility for any knowledge of. Mob Dad. For ML, in memoriam. The mob father schooled his daughter, my best friend, the year we were 17. Girls, never leave a paper trail. Me in the background, and then gave each of us 2 $100 bills and told us to go buy something and do not make it practical. Back when you could shop in the old neighborhood, nice boutique stores like One Way Ticket or Ruby's Blue Sleeves. Life was good in the pizza business. What he meant was, girls have it harder than boys in the most insidious thin-skinned ways, so we should try our best not to regret or implicate ourselves. A brainstorm we only really figured out 2 decades later, which was of course way too late. The blueprints wrought. And for her, the end, abruptly, vault sealed. And who doesn't pray for the soul of an old friend's life lodged perilously upon the ice-encrusted brink? Pray that it idle in the bosom of mercy. Once in her true youth, her father tacked the first orphan notice upon her head that no man would want her but for his money. What it did was make her hungry for the things $100 bills buy, and pizza, the hunger for that knee trembling pizza. And full-size whole turtle pies, and lousy men with limousine-length egos, and silver, and gold only, because silver you have to rub and rub to keep pretty. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, here comes one. I have a big autopsy series in here. 4 or 5 poems of autopsy poems, and of course I can't read them because they're very graphic and wasn't allowed to read them. And there is this attorney series in here also, and they're a little bit longer, meaning 1.5 pages, and wasn't allowed to read them. But I will read one poem from the attorney series called My Men Attorneys, and then I'll move on to some of the pieces from Old School Superhero. Is that all right, timing-wise? My Men Attorneys. And I swear none of this is true, not a single thing of this is true. Don't ask me anything. I would like to say 2 things about this, please. There is a legal term in here called ex parte. It's a very, I worked in law for about 20 years. As a certified paralegal, I had my own business, and I have my, all the degrees in English and specializing in poetry, but I chose to not work in academia and instead worked in law, where there was wonderful amounts of material to be found. And our ex parte means on one side only, which is a very bad term. It means that you're trying to get one over on the other side. It means you're asking of the judge, listen to what I have to say, with the other side hearing it. It's very unfair, and it's usually not allowed. It means you have special circumstances. And so in this particular situation, when I say ex parte, in the second stanza, there's one of the people, the person that's speaking, one of the narrator is on the telephone getting a happy birthday wish. They're on the phone. The law firm is saying happy birthday, and they're on the other side. So the person on the phone receiving the happy birthday wish has no control over what's going on the other side. That ain't fair. And the second thing I'd like to say is the poem ends with a word called otherwhere, which is a word that I learned from one of my favorite poets, Gwendolyn Brooks. And my very favorite poem of all time is called Horses Graze, that she wrote. And it's a very deceptively simple poem. In the poem, the line is, they do not wish that they were otherwhere. And It's a beautiful piece and heartbreaking and lovely and changed my life when I read it. And so I wanted to pay homage to her and that poem in this piece. So it ends with that word, otherwhere. Pardon me. It is called My Men Attorneys. The woman attorney smells better. She'd like to believe she can't help it, but she can't. And it's useless, so she won't. In her book, the legal term deliberation is an act of loss. One whiff resoundingly weeds out charlatan, crusader, the judicial truffle. Allow that she is nutty as a holiday cake, for rise she will to your infernal occasion to purge and catapult you from the crazy-tongued mouth of your intimate, bespectacled dragon. The woman is granite and bronze, come from the lost wax method. My men attorneys are granite and craven, and they built an industry on it. Over the telephone, a favorite law office sings happy birthday. Even the young associate of bad faith at the elder partner's urging participates. After it's sung, the learned man hears, thank you from the bottom of my heart. And he erects. She said thank you. And something about her bottom. It isn't the sexual titillation. It's beneath it, where the lips fancy the sugared foils undoing ex parte. A woman arrives for the interview. Her life is hers. The 2 preschool kids, the busted fuel pump in the car, the bills. All she's come for is the job. After the attorney tells her about the hours and his practice and his pay scale, he actually says, I need somebody to tell me with a straight face that my priorities come before theirs. What is stunning in the captious air before her dumb rejoinder is why his only true friend, when he was imaginary, why his only true friend, when he was 7, was imaginary. Another attorney says excitedly, in front of the father of the deceased teenage boy, this is the case I'll retire on. I'll make so much. Can he help it? His analyst would conclude the 4th grade locked them all in. When the teacher called the plain girl to pass up tests, he scrutinized her unformed hands, thumbing the papers, counting the people per row, number of tests needed, take one and pass it back. He watched her with wet eyes. She might have thought he liked her. A small crush, the real boy. Her heart jumped. But he hardly saw her. He wanted that test. The test is him. The girl, an addendum, otherwhere. And now for a change of pace. Okay. This is old school superhero loves a good wristwatch, and it is a series of poems. There are generally two characters that are speaking to each other back and forth. One is called Super Dan, one is called Me. And he is a superhero from another planet. He does have superpowers. He does exercise those superpowers at various times, but he has human foibles. So he is one of your, superheroes who's not he's kind of like a sad sack superhero is kind of what he is. That's basically how I would frame him. However, he does good and has a font of wisdom for the most part. And, it's funny, I saw Dodie 2 weeks ago down in Phoenix reading, and he read from his new book, and he was so thrilled. This is how he reads. He was so thrilled to be reading from Deep Lane, and he said, it's so nice to have every single title be the same. You should try it sometime. And I thought to myself, oh, that's a great idea. And then I went, hey, wait a minute. My chapbook has almost every single title is the same title, except for the numbers are different, like in comics. Every title is Super Dan Comics Question Box Series. This one is number 40. Mark Doty. Super Dan. Pick the shovel up. Do not be afraid of a square point shovel. Those are strong boots you've got on. What are those, Red Wings? You've got good boots. Where are your leather gloves? Pick up the shovel. Look, here's the outside fairness doctrine. You'll hear it only once. The pickaxe is meaner than the shovel. 30 seconds swinging the pickaxe, you'll think the shovel is a dinner fork. Put on the gloves. The duct tape wrapped around the middle finger does not impede its workability. Me. But the finger feels funny. It doesn't bend normal. Why don't I go get you a Gatorade? Super Dan, it'll bend in with the digging. Me, how did I know that's all you'd say? Super Dan, no, there's more. Sometimes help is help. It's not clapping and cheering in the bleachers. 31. Super Dan Comics, Question Box Series number 31. Super Dan. Super Dan is the only one who speaks in this particular poem. Super Dan. Say I got rich. And I'm not saying I want to be rich. And I'm not saying I don't want to be rich. But say I was and I had a choice. Full-time maid or full-time chef? Please, no contest. I'll take the chef. No, a cook. Because a cook can cook, where a chef spoons sauce and froth. I'm saying you can live with a little dust on the table or soap scum or dishwasher pile up. But every day, 3 times a day, good food is a treasure. And that's why we say grace over our food. And not when we turn on the vacuum. Later that same day, Without fanfare, Super Dan left the expensive restaurant shaking his head. Why do I need a dictionary just to eat a meal? Was that dessert menu even in English? What was with that flight of wine? That ganache dribbled with hothouse jam? That goat cheesecake? Only a chef would put goat anything in a dessert. I would have a cook serving up some nice brownies or a simple, straightforward pie. Give me a good stiff chocolate milk, a warm slice of boysenberry pie, and I can come in for that unassuming workhorse of a landing you all covet. I can make the streets palatable for law-abiding creatures and also human beings in this, our tumbling, trying valley. That it? One more? All right. Okay, I'm going to end with a Super Dan. Ha ha ha. One more, I'm ending with a Super Dan. Super Dan Comics number 30. This is a skin triptych, 20 years wedded. Super Dan. So, gal pal, what is Victoria's Secret? Me. You don't know, Dan? Really? Super Dan's see-through eyes, swirly as Nautilus's. Me. All right. She has humongous, perky breasts and a slim, tight treasure chest, and you want it. Super Dan. So how is that a secret? With that high-lift bra of hers, huh? Better not tell Victoria's Secret if she thinks that's something she's keeping to herself. Me. Did you know researchers say sex, if you're lucky, lasts about 6 minutes, and foreplay is designated to be 30 minutes, mandatory. They said so on Good Morning America. 30 minutes of kissing and caressing and nibbling on stuff. That's so women and men can be aroused on the same stage, in the same scene. Super Dan. I'm washing my hot spots. Start the foreplay without me. 3. Super Dan. Let me tell you about that 30-minute shower you're always taking. One thing you need to know, other than everyone in the world asks for their back to be washed, but you naturally ask, I wash your front, is that soap is there to make water wetter. It disallows the surface tension. You're rubbing yourself essentially with ashes and beef fat. Have a happy shower. Thank you very much.